Tonight's The Truth Unlimited Victorious Outcast video podcast is supported by the Total Life Changers, where your health matters. Awaken your mind, body, and spirit with the popular products NutriBurst Dietary Supplement and ISO Tea with the dynamic full spectrum of hemp extract from Total Life Changers, where we provide products and community that you will feel. Also, be ready in 2022 to join the Destiny Reignition Program, a mindset-changing course that is taking people from potential to power. Be on the lookout for more information about that shortly in 2022. Registration. What's good, family? What's good? What's happening? Welcome to the Victorious Outcast video podcast. With this episode, we have a special guest. We make believe we're keeping her a secret until we introduce her, but we'll be talking about educational empowerment, and this is why. The nation is experiencing some stagnation in public schools, and the enrollment is down. Teachers are still concerned with the size of their classes. Some teachers across the country are experiencing the dichotomy between hybrid and remote learning that has caused tension between the importance of live engagement and interaction in the classroom. Young people, sometimes they are addicted to technology, yet they burn out at the same time. And it's really difficult for teachers, like our guest today, to have tech in the classroom and attempt to engage in an exciting way for students and find that balance at the same time. So we're returning back to the classroom more and more. And how do we use the technology and still keep balance? Do we find a solution by using micro learning formats of 7 to 10 minute video shorts? Could that be a way to have kids really engage with the curriculum and use the technology for good? It's been very tough these past few years, and I'm empathetic towards school systems, teachers, parents, and mostly the students, because they are at the core of this leveling up talk that is going on. There's one-on-one technology that's already trending, online tutoring and new classrooms and hybrid classrooms, which seems here to stay. It may require some defining. If we're talking about this type of model of half the class online and the other half the class in person, that's a really difficult and different approach. And what the data shows and what we hear from teachers around the country is it's really difficult for teachers to have this type of model and make the classroom make sense. But this is where we're headed. Yet now we're going to the hybrid 2.0. With district leaders saying that they're really in need of the ability to adapt properly the advantages that technology brings, because technology creates a lot of theoretical and conceptual framework, but they are really concerned that the students get the practical skill sets and interpersonal skills that they need. Since March 2020, COVID took the world by storm, and the failings of the U.S. educational system have made headlines over and over again. Increasingly, parents are looking for alternative educational methods, with homeschooling options on the rise from 3% pre-pandemic to 11% in the 2021-22 school year, with no signs of numbers returning to pre-pandemic levels. Even the Biden administration, who has ordered $40 billion to be invested in the U.S. workforce to address critical shortages and help get underserved populations into the workforce as part of the American Rescue Plan, have schools in mind, which are getting involved as well. And this is not to mention the socioeconomic dynamics and inequalities for underserved communities that lack access to technology, and with too few teachers lacking resources, and said hybrid classrooms are just some of the challenges that drove families to reevaluate their children's educational setting. now more than ever, not to mention the plethora of other issues plaguing our current school systems. In fact, some of the industries facing the greatest shortages are heavily influenced by advancing technology. Careers in engineering and trades are in desperate need of employees. With the rising cost of attending college, the potential to enter the workforce saddled with large, cumbersome debt, and the challenges of finding well paying jobs with a good future, they're driving both students and parents to look more earnestly at careers in trade. So the fact that the world of education continues to evolve to meet the needs of the individual students and support identifying career paths that will provide stability, growth, and it won't be a surprise as the students' needs and the workplace concerns continue to drive change in education. We will need to move beyond traditional models that no longer serve society. That is why our guest today is going to help us vet, prioritize, and address what has worked best for her in dealing with some of these very challenging issues, to give her a clearer perspective on what an empowered educational system would consist of if we could garner the power and support to make it a reality. So let's tap into that. Our special guest today is a passionate disciple of Jesus Christ who loves God and loves God's people, a teacher in more ways than one. She currently works as a special education teacher for the New York City Department of Education and has taught in various ministerial capacities for the past 14 years. She was licensed to preach while a member of the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York, where the pastor is the Reverend Dr. Elaine Flake. She has served as a class teacher in the discipleship ministry, intercessory team co-leader for the Joshua Generations 20s and 30s ministry, and a member of the adult leadership team for Ignite Youth Ministry. My dear colleagues hold several degrees, including Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell University and a Master of Divinity degree from Nyack College Alliance Theological Seminary. She is currently pursuing a Ph.D. in Administration and Supervision, Church and Non-Public School Leadership at Fordham University. In December of 2021, she was ordained an itinerant deacon in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The mighty reverend's teaching and preaching is grounded in Revelations 19:10. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Her heartfelt desire is to see the people of God walk in the fullness of their divine authority and purpose. She trusts and depends wholly on God to preach and teach to a lost and dying world that Jesus lives, while declaring God's promises for God's people through God's holy word. Ladies and gentlemen of the Victorious Outcast tribe, won't you put your hands together for our special guest today, the Right Reverend Kate Ofikuru. She's here. She's here. She's here. Hey, my dear sister, how are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm so glad to be here on the show with you. Thank you again so much for the invitation. I was listening to everything that you said, and I'm just like, yeah, a lot of that.
Well, I just wanted to give our listeners the context in which you operate, because it's a challenging one. And it's a one that self-serving politicians don't take seriously. And consequently, we are making something out of nothing in terms of the resources that we have working in the educational system. But it's such a pleasure to have you today. I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to take the time to be with us. How have you been in general during getting toward the other side of such a challenging 2.5-year season?
Well, you used the right word. It has been challenging. I think because of this initial switch to leading this very busy, this very everything, everywhere, all the time kind of life to now being stuck inside, that was an adjustment, right? And it, it weighed emotionally, and I believe, that we came to a point where many of us came had to come to a point where we had to come to terms with that reality and pivot, so to speak. And now that we have returned back to in person everything for the most part, now it required another pivot. And our first year back in person was last school year, and you hit the nail on the head. Really, it was very challenging. It was part of it was having to grieve the loss of this slow down life that I had become accustomed to. Right, being in the house most of the time, teaching and learning from home, to now my body physically having to readjust to commuting again was painful. Was There was a lot of stress on my body, having to re-engage, learning in person, and navigating not only my own mental space, but other people's mental space, and engaging them in that kind of way was also very taxing. And then on top of all of that, being an educator in the New York City Department of Education, with all of the demands that were being placed on us and with changes happening every single day, it was a lot. It was a lot. So now in this kind of second school year in person, quasi post pandemic, we're not out of it yet because I have colleagues and kids who are still getting COVID. So um, we're definitely not out of the woods yet. But in this kind of second year of in person, quasi post pandemic, um, things are a lot easier because of the accommodations, and um, because of the adjustments that I made in the first school year, and over the summer, right? Reevaluating, reflecting on what went well and what didn't go well, and a lot didn't go well last school year. Let's just say that. Let's just call last school year for me personally just a little bit, a smidge of a dumpster fire. It wasn't all bad,
Wow.
but it was a lot, like not at all bad, but kind of
Yeah.
like
A lot
stepping back
of
from that.
experimentation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's a lot I can go into, but focusing. This school year, I've started this school year by really coming from a place of heavy self reflection, heavy planning about my own mental space. Right? How do I plan on approaching my pedagogy this year? How do I plan on approaching student engagement this year? How do I plan on approaching interpersonal relationships with my colleagues, with my administration this year? How do I plan on making sure that I'm taking care of me and that I'm engaging in, I'm going to say this tentatively, self care, a buzzword that people are throwing around a lot, but it means a lot of different things. Ooh, I lost my camera again. One second, let me just try to plug it back in
Not
again.
to worry. Not to worry. Yeah. It's been challenging, and you're not only operating in um, both just the teacher lane, but you're also operating in the church lane. And so I'm wondering how you are navigating um, being a new co-pastor of a church in Queens, and it must be amazing and challenging.
Well, yeah, that was, and so when we talk about reflections and challenges, that too was a lot. I had been in this space of discerning for quite some time, and in the midst of the process of ordination, that kind of leveled up the discerning, like, okay, now you have these credentials and God has moved you into this space, as a leader in this particular way. What do you hear the Lord saying to you is next, right? And so having to discern that in the midst of wrapping up a tumultuous school year, I was really intentional, between my two ordinations, and to say, in fact, my second ordination, receiving my elder's ordination this past April was a surprise because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting it for another year. But the Lord does what he does when he does it, and he does all things well, right? And
Indeed.
so in the midst of, hearing from the Lord about next and being prepared to shift and being prepared to move out of a place that had become, slightly comfortable, there was, was opportunity. And because I was sitting with the Lord and I was listening intently, and I had heard to prepare, I knew that when the call came, the answer was yes. And the yes was not actually to a co-pastorship, right? It wasn't to be to co-lead this congregation with the pastor that was there. It was really to be her second, right? To sit in the seat of an assistant and to support her in the ways that she needed, as she deemed that she needed my support. And then, not to get into the details, but then it evolved into this interim pastor. So I was responsible from May until the beginning of this month. I was responsible for all of the preaching and all of the teaching and supporting the stewards and managing the affairs of the church. So I was, I guess you say, Pastor IA. I mean, there's not necessarily a thing in our church, but the pastor Kanan, still very much so the pastor Kanan, she has resumed the pulpit. So I have stepped back from that role as of, like I said, the beginning of this month. And so I'm back to supporting her in an assistant pastor's role. But still, that still requires intentional work. It still is a demand on time. And this particular month, I have started the last semester of coursework for my PhD, and I'm taking 3 classes. Ooh. So, wow. Fortunately, one of the classes hasn't started yet, so that's a little bit of a relief. But still, the 2 classes, sure. Full-time job, being in ministry in the support role, and number 2 chair. It's a lot to balance. It really is, and
it's like you have to exercise and ramp up the endurance of your muscle memory to take on the layers of calling that you have on your life. And then all of this in the midst of having to serve people. And sometimes people can put demands on us that are unexpected. Today, I'm going to put a demand on you in that I'm going to ask you to take part in a tradition of the Victorious Outcast tribe, that when you are a guest here, we like to get to know our guests on a more personal level. So I ask you some personal questions before we get into the main topic. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
So first icebreaker question is, what 2 musical artists are you listening to most on your device these days?
They are 2 and 1 and the same, oddly enough. Maverick City Music, absolutely. They had definitely carried us through the pandemic, into worship, into the presence of the Lord. And Naomi Rain Solomon, who is a part of Maverick City Music, but she had her own albums before she became part of Mav City.
Right.
And
isn't she a friend of Greater Allen as well?
She's a friend of Greater Allen. Yes, I know her personally. She's absolutely amazing, incredibly anointed. She dropped a new individual album, and she's got another project coming up. So I got to worship with her in person in Brooklyn a few weeks ago for the launch of that project. And
I saw that.
Yeah, they are really the 2 that, kind of are on repeat. And even when I tell my phone to shuffle all music, it's still what's predominantly played.
And then they have the covering of Elder Kirk Franklin.
Yes.
which is a nice covering to have. Now, what dish gives you the most comfort when eating?
Oh, that's easy. Give me some jollof rice with plantain and stewed chicken any day of the week. And if my mama made it, even better.
Go ahead, mama.
Nigerian in me.
Putting it down. Yeah, I
have an affinity for this meat dish called picadillo, which is Cuban with some black beans and rice. And then from
Amazing.
working at the culinary for 12 years, the teaching kitchens used to feed the staff, and the international kitchen had a Mexican day. And I fell in love with enchiladas.
Oh yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I know you're from the Boogie Down Bronx. Yes,
Yes.
yes. Represent,
Yep.
represent.
All day. Yep. Yep.
But you are also of Nigerian descent, yes?
Yes. Hmm.
So were you born in Nigeria, or were you born in the Bronx?
I was born at North Central Bronx Hospital
just,
on a
just
Monday
check it.
morning.
Just check it. I was going to get my ancestry.com on. So do you have a particular fond childhood memory that can put us in the context of your adolescent years, just to get to know you a little better?
Sure. Well, two things. So my the summer leading into my third grade year, we took a family trip back home because my little brother had just been born. And so, they were, all the things. I won't go into details, it's a long story. But um, my aunts are all, on my mother's side, are all around my age. They're only slightly older than me. Again, another story for another day. But as they were going to taking their lessons, because their season, their summer is really a rainy season. So imagine it's like fall; it's the beginning of the school year for them. And they would carry me along to their lessons, and so I would be sitting in the class with them, and then they'd go on their lunch break and play in the yard and chop down uh, the help to chop down the lawn with machetes, and then walk to the market. And so that was like my earliest memory of being back home, um, riding the motorcades to various parts of the city and the village. So that's one that kind of stands out in my mind around like my family and things that kind of like stick with me as cherished memories. And then being back here in New York, one of the things that really stood out to me was my eighth grade year. I was getting ready to go away for high school, and my math teacher, who was also like a mentor to me, she's like one of the most important people in my life, Miss Jacqueline Holland. She asked me to tutor for her in the after school program. And that's where I kind of got my first taste of teaching, right? When I look over the major demarcations in my life and the dots that connect, it was sitting with those students and helping them to understand, fifth graders, helping them to understand math. And then um, I experienced both the joys of teaching as well as the heartache of teaching, because one of the young ladies who was in the after school program suddenly passed away from asthma attack. And so that was kind of like something that really kind of stuck out in my mind and has stayed with me all these years.
So did you have a good support system growing up? Because we all know it takes a community, a village to raise a child.
I had an amazing support system that's still mostly in place to this very day. Um,
Nice.
my mom always saw me as this kind of strong-headed, strong-willed child who, when she set her mind to do something, she was gonna do it, and she was gonna do it well. So she never really like doubted my ability to get things done. So when I said that I wanted to do something, it was just like, okay. Like she's always had my back. I love my mom. Um, and then I also have some amazing people who saw me when I didn't really kind of know myself and I was struggling
Mm.
to kind of, get a grasp of my identity. They kind of pulled me under their wing. And they nurtured my intellect. They nurtured who I knew myself to be strongest. I was a smart girl, right? So they nurtured that. They pushed that. They're like, well, you're the smart girl, so we're just gonna like encourage you to be that, and don't worry about anything else. And so the leaders of the Fieldston Enrichment Program, housed at Fieldston School in Riverdale, uh, our founder, Mr. Alfredo Thomas, and the current director, one of the current co-directors of the program, Winslow Raymond Jones. We actually work together now,
Nice,
but
nice.
he was a teacher's assistant, program assistant, while I was a student in the program. All of the teachers, really, Mr. Jeremiah, who was our computer teacher, but also taught math, Mrs. Jones. There are just so many people who came through the program who really pushed us beyond our expectation. And my math teacher was a part of the program as well, Miss Holland. And so they were really the ones who kind of were like, we're not going to let you settle for less. We're going to push you, and we're going to expect you to do these great things and to go forth to a great high school and then to a great college. And I happen to have kept tabs with them, over the years. We reconnected with them recently, and started sending students at my old school to the program as well. So in the process of starting another year with them. So we're excited about what's going to happen as we continue to promote educational excellence. They are really like the strongest kind of support, the longest lasting support. And then I have my sister ministers who, God divinely led me to them, and them to me. Oh, there I go going out again. That's,
We can still hear you while you mess with your camera. But it's cool that having a support system actually nurtures what we already have inside, and sometimes that community around us can identify attributes that we don't even know exist. So you were a good student all the time, huh?
not
You
all the
weren't
time.
into the
Not all the
boys and the activities.
No, college was a different experience for me. I think because I got so involved in a lot of things that I didn't have exposure to before going to college. Time management was definitely an issue for me once I got there. And I was involved in a lot of things. And you ask my best friends from college now, they were like, yeah, Kate did a lot on campus, like a lot. I think I definitely got to a point, and I'll just tell this really quick story because it relates to the question at hand. I ended up having surgery on my left foot. It was elective surgery. Um, it was in order for me to prevent me from having arthritis further down the years. And I said, well, I have a break from college, and I can go back and they have support systems in place to help me get around. And following my recovery, I started to have other health issues that were keeping me from being able to get my work done, severe fatigue, and no one could really explain it. And I had they're some of my best friends to this very day. My girls rallied around me. They made sure I could get dinner. They made sure I had groceries. I had snacks at home. They made sure I got notes from the classes that we were in together. They are amazing. They're my sisters for life, and I am grateful for them. So when we talk about support systems, they are definitely, we could not talk for months, and then we'll pick up the phone and hop back in like we didn't miss a beat. They are amazing. I've also had the privilege to serve in ministry alongside some of the most amazing people on the planet. Reverend Eugene Harrison has been like I don't even I barely have the words to describe who God has used him to be in my life. In the absence of my father, to speak into my life, to pour into me, to be an example for me in teaching and preaching ministry. Like I'm great. He was the gift and the blessing I came out of left field, did not expect, did not know was going to happen. And he's been that for me. Our pastor, of course, phenomenal leadership, phenomenal example, amazing mentor. Just to sit at her feet and to hear her talk. I can listen to Reverend Elaine Flake talk for hours. And we almost got there this past summer. Like she was the lecturer for the morning, and it got to the end of like an hour and a half, and I was like, why are we stopping? why 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 are we stopping? She can keep talking. Like, let her continue to speak. We can sit here till lunch. I'm good with that. But yeah.
Part of having a great support system is because we attract who we show up in the world to be. And so you have such a nurturing and servant leader's heart that folks are naturally attracted to you, and the right folks, because you show up righteously. I'm just here to say that. I can bear witness to that.
Bless you,
but
sir.
why
Thank you
teaching?
so much.
Why teaching? Now, what was the attribute, calling, or pivotal moment that allowed you to follow the destiny of preacher teacher?
So this goes back to Cornell. A lot happened at Cornell.
What had happened was
a lot happened at Cornell. But I was an industrial and labor relations major. And I was really interested in the workplace and how to improve the workplace for working class people. That was my passion. It still is to an extent. And I was sitting and observing a career fair that was going on. And I was invited to one of the tables, which was the union DC37. And I was attracted because my mom is a member. And then I'm listening to talk like, well, that's great. And I'm really, intrigued. But what I really have been finding that I'm more interested in doing is kind of improving the lives of working class people by helping their children. And I knew that this was a divine moment for me because it's the first time that I had voiced what was kind of lingering in the back of my mind. Like, this work is important and it needs to be done. But where can we get at the root of a thing, right? And speaking to the representatives at that table was the first time that I had said it out loud. And when I said it out loud, it kind of cemented in my spirit, you're going to teach. That's what you're going to do, right? And I was like, okay, Lord, I guess I'm going to teach. They still invited me to do their internship for the summer, and it was still very instructive. Got to sit at bargaining tables here in the city and all of that. But that was the moment when I knew that the Lord was kind of shifting my trajectory. And as I approached senior year, everybody's wondering, so what are you going to do? Are you going to get a job? Are you going to go to grad school? Are you just going to go home to your mama's house and sit for a while, which I did think about doing.
Sure.
And I did end up with an opportunity to stay on campus for another year. And that opportunity as an AmeriCorps Vista, and a Vista means Volunteer in Service to America. It is part of the National Service Corps out of the federal government. I got to spend time working in the Ithaca community. And that time, working with them on grassroots organizing projects and with their youth group and with schools really opened my eyes up to the broader issues and helped me to come to terms with my call to ministry, which I heard my junior year and just didn't know what to do with that. I was like, all right, so, the Lord is saying I'm going to go to ministry, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. But my Vista year really helped me to kind of come to terms with what that might look like and the way forward. And my passion for education would be the thing that kind of would lead me into the more that God would have for me. And so that is when I decided that I would go to grad school to become a teacher, because I didn't have the teaching credits in undergrad to go right into a teaching position. So,
yeah. So your teaching calling has led you even to fine tune it more definitively toward special education. What is that? What's an overview of how special education is executed these days post-pandemic. Give our audience an opportunity to be in that classroom with you and to experience what you experience on a daily basis, if you would.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying every student needs an IEP. Yeah, I may have shocked you by saying that, but every student needs an individualized education plan. Our public school system, because of our reliance on federal money, that goes according to annual yearly progress or AYP, and affords schools or affords districts money based on that, and that annual yearly progress is determined by standardized testing. And then that's a whole nother conversation we can get it into. We see that students, even pre-pandemic, were presenting with educational challenges due to the fact that their needs weren't being adequately met within their classroom setting. Now, does that mean that every student needs to be in special education? Absolutely not. Special education is designed to create an environment for students whose IEP goals are not able to be met within the general education setting, right? So the goal of an IEP is to provide access for students to provide access to the general education curriculum for all students. So the problem with the accessing the general education curriculum is who designs this curriculum. The curriculum is not designed to provide the necessary accommodations and modifications that students from different backgrounds need. Same thing with standardized testing, right? Our standardized tests are not designed with the socio-cultural backgrounds of the test takers in mind. They're designed toward the middle, which is what? Middle class, uh, suburban white people, right? There are terms and concepts in both the curriculum and the standardized testing that are not able to be reached by students from marginalized backgrounds or lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, even the term lower socioeconomic status, I can get into, conversation about that, but that's not the point, right? So for special education, especially special education in the context in which I teach, a lot of our students are coming with deficits that have gone unaddressed for multiple years. And what they are strong in has not been elevated or supported. I have a lot of students that are amazing artists, right? So my plan is use their artistry to help them understand the concepts and engage in the skills and strategies that I'm teaching in my language arts and in my history class, right? They can draw me a picture that represents what the War of 1812 was, or what Reconstruction looked like, then I can be able to say this in this representation, this artistic expression shows that they have gained proficiency in this standard, right? Or proficiency in this particular topic. It doesn't necessarily always have to be done in a cookie cutter fashion, but that is what is dictated by districts. That is what's dictated by the state education department as well as the Federal Education Department. So that's the
Now, let
challenge
me
I'm dealing with.
go ahead. That's the challenge.
That's
Huh?
the challenge I'm dealing with. Yeah.
Now, what about these students? Are they behaving or receiving this new adjusted post pandemic classroom differently? Are you noticing a change in if they're apprehensive post pandemic in the classroom?
I would have said yes last year, right? Students are very resilient. Young people are just generally very resilient, and so I feel like my observation is that they've really bounced back from the challenge of adjusting to in-person school, and really are just going with the flow, right? I think most of the adjustment is the same adjustment that happens at the beginning of every school year. I'm in a new grade, I have new teachers, they have new expectations. Let me push the envelope and see what I can get away with. Not all kids, but some, and I've had to deal with those. And I laugh, and I think you know why I laugh. But
Of course.
uh, there are, the normal adjustments at the beginning of the school year is what we're experiencing now, and so in terms of like what happens post pandemic, right? A lot of those questions are not necessarily being raised this school year, mostly because what is happening within our school, at least, is that we cycle back to kind of what the expectations were pre-pandemic. So, I mean, I'm sure that
Now,
there are
with
conversations happening elsewhere, but they just not happening at our school.
So with the challenging classroom size and budget cuts and remote learning and school safety being some of the challenges in this season's educational empowerment, what are 3 top challenges that you are experiencing in this current season of your teaching tenure?
Hmm. The first challenge would definitely be listening to teachers. That's always been a challenge, and it still has gone on unaddressed. Right? Uh, Decisions are being made, and policies are being put in place that don't take teacher voice into account. Right? And it would be easy for me to say, "Well, teachers, we're not being heard," but the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. Right? How many practices, how many policies are going to be enacted only for Central, the New York City Department of Education, we call Central, only for Central to turn around and say, "Well, sorry guys, that didn't work. We're gonna try something else." And we know, I heard this analogy the other day. I believe it was Trevor Noah who made it. He said that when a country is building a championship national team, they don't look at the existing players and try to shape and train them to become champions. They start with the youngest players in the country, and they work with them all throughout their development until they are ready to join the national team. And by then, because they have been under such intense training and preparation, then they can contend for a championship, right? But we don't do that in education. We don't do that. We try something for a year, 2 years tops. It doesn't yield the results that we want. You pivot and you turn and do something else. Well, you can't see returns in 1 and 2 years. At the minimum, you need 3, and even then, it's shady because you have to have the consistency in the population to ensure it's the same students taking the same assessments, going through the same program at the same pace, and you can't control for all of those variables all the time. Because of that, we see this intense turnover in the curriculum being pushed forward, in the policies, in the expectations. Not necessarily expectations, but in the policies and the practices, the new practices that we're putting in place in order to support our students. You say that we're supporting our students, but you're not doing it in an effective and efficient manner. That doesn't do the work that needs to be done. That is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. And I think that kind of like trumps everything else. Like, yes, we're under new, our contract is expired. We need a new contract. And, that would be wonderful. We all deserve a raise. We all deserve a raise because we're doing way more than what we're paid for. Even though,
Indeed.
New York City teachers, public school teachers, are one of the best paid teachers in the country, right? We are still being asked and tasked to do way more, and what we're getting paid with all the other expenses of living in New York City and the surrounding area, those things add up. So,
Let me make a shift. If we can shift to the impact that poverty has had on education. I know that it's been reported that last fall, 22% of children in the U.S. live at or below poverty levels. I know that defining poverty is a family of four with an annual income of 23,000 or lower. Some estimates put poverty levels for public schools at about 25% in the near future. Students living at below poverty levels tend to have highest rates of study problems. Students with not enough food or sleep are less likely to perform at their full potential. And schools know these truths firsthand. And despite efforts to provide students with basic essentials, teachers, administrators, and lawmakers, and even you, my dear sister, simply understand that we just don't have enough resources to go around. So, that being said, do you have any experience with the impact of poverty in your educational journey? And if so, what has been your observation?
Oh, absolutely. My school resides in the poorest school district in the Bronx and one of the poorest in the city. Not only that, but the number of students who are SIFE, which means students in temporary housing, SIF, I should say, students in temporary housing, is astronomically larger than neighboring districts. There are several temporary housing arrangements in different apartment buildings surrounding our school. And so when you talk about poverty and those who are uh, in dire straits financially, really, here's the thing: when we talk about numbers, right? Uh, the problem with like giving numbers the way that our government is accustomed to do it is that they don't give numbers in context, right? $25,000 is really not a lot of money at all, but it's even less money living in New York City, right? Like
Okay.
$25,000 in New York City is like $40,000 in Virginia, right? So like it's difficult for me to kind of quantify just how poor a lot of our families are. Not only are our families dealing with abject poverty, but many of our families are also new or recent arrivals to the country. So they don't have green cards, so they can't work on the table. They can barely find work under the table. And the work they do find under the table is not nearly sufficient to provide for their family's needs. We have families that are living two and three families deep in a one bedroom apartment, right? Um, so this is the reality of the students that I teach.
Not
It's
to
like,
mention the 15,000 new immigrants that have been bused to New York City, and we trying to be good neighbors and receive them properly. Eventually, they're going to wind up in your classrooms with these challenging issues.
absolutely, absolutely. We have a whole class of students on our grade level that speak little to no English. An entire class, 20 some odd students, and they barely speak any English, right? That was my motivation to learn Spanish. That was I just had my one, and my one, bless his soul, love me some him. He tried so hard. And I had this student for my first 2 years teaching at my current school. And I could just see the effort that he was putting in, and just how he struggled with the language and getting him to express himself. And so the second year was like, let's try something. I want you to try to write it out in Spanish. Your Spanish writing may not be that good, but I want you to write out in Spanish, and then I want you to tell me in Spanish. And you tell me in Spanish, and I'm gonna like try to transliterate what you're saying, and then we'll work together to translate it. The confidence that inscribed in this young man, his scores went through the roof. He went from a level 1 to a level 2. I can't tell you the joy that it brought to me to see the growth in this young man and his confidence in trying English and his confidence in speaking up in class, you know, even that much. So that inspired me. And you know, part of my accommodation for my students is that when they're struggling to say something to me in English, I'm going to speak to them in Spanish and have them respond to me in Spanish, and then go from there and give them the English that goes along with the Spanish that they're saying. And so I have a young lady in my class this year who, you know, needs that. I want you to push past saying, I don't know the English, I don't know how to say it. And I'm going to engage you in Spanish as best as I can. And my teaching assistant, she is fluent. And so we're going to push you that way and then expect you to come back now. And we'll give you the English for what it is that you're saying. All right. So in
That's
English,
real
you know,
educational empowerment.
mhm, absolutely.
So I know that you are pursuing your PhD and you're on the home stretch. Thank you, Jesus.
Hallelujah.
So for folks who are, are considering taking the next level in their graduate education, what could you share with them uh, about navigating the higher learning, if you will, so that they can have an idea of what obstacles to overcome?
Well, first, you have to be prepared to make a sacrifice. This work is sacrificial. And it's caused me to give up time hanging out. It's caused me to give up time watching my favorite shows. It's caused me to, you know, I get them in on little breaks that I have. But, you know, to say, no, I cannot do this, or no, I cannot go there, and no, I cannot watch that. That's the, you know, first and foremost is to have a mindset of sacrifice, because the intentionality that is going to be required to get through a program, to see a program through to the end, is one that it has to be sacrificial. The second is, be sure that you intend to see it through to the end, because as many people out here will say, you know, there were, there was, you know, there's lots of money for PhD programs. Yes, there are. If you're going into the sciences, technology, engineering, or math, if you're going into the STEM fields, you should not pay for a PhD program. If you're going into the humanities, uh, uh, if you're going into liberal arts fields, related fields, there's some money for a PhD, but it ain't a lot. So, you know, that was the myth that I kind of had broken for me very early on. It was like, you know, I shouldn't have to pay for my PhD program. Well, you're not in one of those fields where they pay for the PhD programs, right? And I had to know for certain that this was what God wanted me to do. I I had tried to pursue a P. Well, in fact, it wasn't even a PhD; it was an EDD. I had attempted to pursue an EDD a number of years ago on my own. I was just like, "This is what I want to do. I'm going to do it." You know, like, all right, God, you know, like you open doors, whatever. Like, make, you know, things go smoothly, and things, you know, for the most part, went pretty smoothly in the whole application process. But it wasn't time, right? And that was just before I started ministerial training at Allen. Like, I got the rejection letter the week before, and the following week I started ministerial training. So I was like, God, I see what you did there. You know, I see what
Confirmation.
it's funny because the night before I got my rejection letter, I was saying to a friend whose daughter was going through the high school application process. I said, I know you're nervous. You want her to go to this great school. You want her to get away from home. But if they say no, like the thing that gets me through the anxiety, so to speak, of waiting and anticipating an answer, is that my faith helps me to know that if God is God, what He has for me is for me. And if they tell me no, it's because God has something else for me. And I trust and believe that. Now, she wasn't a believer, but you know, when she asked me, what do I do? And I'm like, this is what I do, right? You got to find something for you. Like, whether you're going to put faith in, you know, whatever you're going to put faith in. For me, my faith is in Almighty God, who made me and knows the plans that He has for me. And this word says this, right? So to get the rejection, I was like, well, God, you must have, this hurts, but you must have something something else for me, and I would not give my journey um, up for anything. The people that I've journeyed with, who God has divinely connected me with, the timing was the timing, and His timing is perfect. But
And
then
when one door closes,
one door closes, another opens, right? And then you know, I've, you know, I'm approaching a pivot, a turning point in this ministerial journey, and I got some sleepless nights. And Lord's like, "Hello, you know you got something else to do, right?" And I at first I was just like, "Let me go back to sleep, Lord. Let me go back to sleep." And after the third night of being woken up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back, I'm like, "All right, Lord, what do you want from me? What do you want from me?" And long story short, I was led to Fordham, and I was God divinely orchestrated series of events and conversations that led me to the program that I'm in. And so I would say, to anyone, know what it is that you're going for. You have to know yourself and what it is that you're going for, because there are far too many ABDs out in the world. And for those of you who don't know what ABD is, an ABD is someone who has done all their coursework and has defended a proposal, and the only thing that they need to do to graduate is write a dissertation. And to have spent all that time and effort, and money, right? Because time is money, to spend all of that just to be ABD. Nobody recognizes ABD. You're either a doctor or you're not, right? And it's not necessarily that it's about a title, but if you're going to go through the process, go through the process, make it
right?
finish.
Get all that belongs to you.
Right, right.
Listen, this has been wonderful. My dear sister, Reverend Kate, it's been an awesome time hearing your experiences and you taking us into the classrooms and giving us the perspective of the educational system today. And I'm convinced that someone listening today has received your wisdom and it has added value to them. And I am just grateful that you have been able to take the time. And I wouldn't want to let you get out of here without asking you one last question. So if you can share the answer to this last question with us, we'll be blessed forevermore. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
So if you were given unlimited power, boom, unlimited power, what three changes, as a last question, would you make to the educational system to empower it toward greater success?
Um, First, I make all the classrooms 15-1. Um, and then I would give each school the ability to choose their own curriculum. And finally, I would add, for every high school in every borough, I would add a a technological and what do they call it? CTE. So CTE is essentially for those who are not going to pursue college degree, and they're training in all kinds of specialties and certifications. I would add, I would make it 1-to-1, right? You have a high school that is focused on college readiness, and then you have a high school that's CTE, so that our students know that in this climate and in this ever changing, technologically advancing society that we are in, college is not the be all end all, and college is not for everybody. So I think we used to kind of say, go to college, and that's what you're supposed to do. But a lot of the shortfall in labor in our current climate is in areas and in specialties that don't require a college education. They require training. so so if we don't encourage our students to, first of all, give them access to that training, give them access to that training, and then also not only give them access to that training, but also give them opportunities to engage in those fields early on, then they don't know that that is not only acceptable, but a monetarily, a financially solvent way, a financially, what's the word I'm looking for? That they can make some good money.
Appropriate.
They make some good money working as a tech at the airport, working as a mechanic at the airport, and they don't need to spend $80,000 to $100,000 on a college degree to do that.
Indeed, indeed. And there are initiatives guiding and paving the way for those who are not taking a college route to take a hold of, so that folks can live their best life by apprehending these opportunities that are out there, that are alternatives to an old stereotype of it's college or nothing, right?
Yes. Career and
Indeed.
technical education. That's the word I was looking for. CTE. Career.
Okay.
Yes.
CTE. Cool. Reverend Kate, it's been a blessing and an honor. And we at the Victorious Outcast video podcast honor you and wish you the best for your journey going forward. I know that the best is yet to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share on this space. Thank you for your intentionality about pursuing and engaging in those topics that we are so in need of having a conversation around. It's been an absolute blessing and a privilege. Thanks so much.
Bless you. Listen, my final word today for America, because this is America, right here on the video, Victorious Outcast video podcast, is that the nation may need to come to grips with the fact that teaching methods used decades ago simply are not working for the modern student. And one of the biggest things holding back the American public education system is a suppression of teacher innovation. The powers that be are not listening, as you heard Sister Kate talk about. And it is partially created by the enforcement of standardized tests, fake critical race theories, and of course, censorship and the Common Core curriculum. Unfortunately, the problem really needs to be addressed at the federal level, with changes to policy that will result in the change within the public school system. American teachers who are better trained to meet the needs of their students and who are willing to speak up and facilitate change, like dear sister, would give students a chance. So we have to speak up, teachers, because change is possible. I'm your man, Destiny Dan, and this has been Victorious Outcast Video Podcast. Hey, thanks for stopping by the D-Truth Unlimited social media page, where it is the parent page for leadership, health, and travel. So if you're looking to book a travel excursion, we have the page. If you're looking to stay healthy and get your vitamin supplementation, we have the page. And if you're looking for some leadership tips or some master classes, we have the page. I'm Destiny Dan. Glad you could stop by.